Hi, this is Sony Bhartia, and welcome to another episode of Weekly Wrap with Mike. Mike, how are you doing today, and what do you have for us today?
Hey, Swapnil, I'm doing great. Got a lot of good news today. Interesting news. One of the many newsletters I get in my inbox is Tom Kraset's Protocol Cloud. It's an absolutely fantastic format for a newsletter and chock full of good, useful information. This week, Tom covered Amazon's foray into space. On Tuesday, they announced a big-ass initiative to link earthbound cloud computing to satellites. And I say big-ass because, well, they named the new business unit AWS, Aeronautics and Satellite Solutions. AWS ASS. Who knows where this will go? What it is, though, is a continued push by a small segment of tech companies working to make the cloud more accessible, to make it more accessible to more people around the world. And that, my friend, that's a good thing.
Right, I'm sure that Elon Musk is going to have some fun there. I think last week he called Jeff Bezos copycat for whatever announcement they made. So we'll see what Amazon. The thing is, Amazon is it's huge, it's a giant, and they can get into any market they want, and it will be in space is going to be interesting. Space. I think last week. This week, Musk, SpaceX, they launched a satellite from Lockheed Martin to improve GPS. Popular Mechanics, they published a story that Musk or SpaceX just made your GPS slightly better. I disagreed with that because SpaceX, what did they did, they basically delivered their satellite into the space. It's more like saying that, hey, UPS or FedEx made my living room better because they delivered 85 85-inch smart TV into my room. So I tweeted about that no, it's not SpaceX, it's Lockheed Martin that is sending those. And then Musk also has the Space Link satellites with which he wants to cover the whole world. I mean, I know Facebook has been trying with the plane, Google was trying with the balloon, but Musk, he's sent I think he's planning to send 20 or 2,000 satellites into the lower orbit so that the whole Earth is kind of covered with broadband internet. So the story that I picked was something related to the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of similar movements that are going on in this country. And one is that, as we all know, that Facebook is literally not doing anything to kind of check on the hate speech or misinformation and all those campaigns that are being kind of led by Trump administration and his campaign. Facebook more or less has become like Mitch McConnell don't do anything approach. So they refuse to take any action where Twitter was not only flagging them but was removing them, a lot of content there. But now Facebook is finally feeling some heat because big brands have started to pull out from advertising on the platform. And the latest one, and this is really big one, is Sony, because Sony is going to get out their PlayStation 5 in this season. And this is a big story for gaming world. Sony and Microsoft, they are big players. But according to VentureBeat, Facebook and Instagram will not see any official PlayStation content on their feed through the month of July. So Sony has revealed that it is halting all of its social media activities on these two platforms in support of the Stop Hate for Profit campaign that is asking marketers to pull pressure on Facebook to do more to moderate and eliminate hate groups from the platform. On the flip side, a new app called Parler has popped up for conservatives. And Eric Trump, our favorite Ted Cruz, and all those conservatives, they are flocking to the platform because that platform is designed for conservative voices who, when they spread lies, get banned from the regular platform. So they are all flocking. Fox News is covering it. But what a lot of progressives have found that when they go to the platform and they put something, they get banned from the platform. So that is while the platform says it's free speech for all, but actually it's not. And there's something even more disturbing that is going on is they're collecting a lot of sensitive data, which includes driving license, your SSN number. because they're claiming that we want to verify the identity of the person who is posting, because usually what happens on social network, you are anonymous, anybody can be post. Now, if a lot of conservatives are flocking there and they're collecting all this data, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so my old friend and colleague Chip Childers was in the news this week. Chip's the new head honcho at Cloud Foundry Foundation, filling some really big shoes left by great leaders like Abby Kearns and Sam Ramji. Beth Pariseau at Tech Target spoke to Chip about the foundation's embrace of Kubernetes, which NE9's Julian Fisher likens to the new black in the fashion industry. It's becoming the de facto orchestration engine for the cloud. RedMonk's Steve O'Grady sums it up best on the challenge Chip and the CFF community have in front of them. Steve said, "The question is no longer whether or even how to drive Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes together. Instead, it's how Cloud Foundry can provide abstractions above and around Kubernetes to improve the overall developer and operator experience." It's still early days for Kubernetes, so I think we're going to need to watch this space.
Yeah, and if you look at Cloud Foundry's history, they have been doing Kubernetes for a very long time. I think 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, they had one of the biggest, most powerful, and then the Cloud Foundry people love it, Bosch. They brought, because Bosch simplifies everything and Kubernetes complicates everything. So they brought it together, and their project was called Kubo. And I was talking to Abby, and because they had to rebrand the name, because I think there were some copyright issues with maybe Disney or whatever around the word Kubo. So they changed it to a very boring name. It was, I think, Container Runtime, something like that. And then they started, so that project has been iterating for a while. And I think the latest one is called kubecf, which actually is a Cloud Foundry distribution for Kubernetes. So I was talking to Chip also, like, what is the need? And the same thing is that people traditionally saw it was Cloud Foundry versus Kubernetes. But the fact is, it has always been and. We always leverage this and that technology. Now, how they complement each other. I mean, I have talked to Julian also, and he also opined the same thing, that most of, because they do a lot of consultation and they develop a lot of technology around both, that customers want to use both. And the Cloud Foundry, as you rightly said, is going to make it easier, lower the barrier of entry for developers to leverage Kubernetes.
And yesterday was DBA Day around the world. Hope everyone took some time to virtually hug or at least thank the database administrators in their lives. I continue to see a lot of noise bubbling up in the cloud database space. On Tuesday, Ovum's big data bigwig, Tony Baer, covered Couchbase's DBaaS launch for ZDNet. Couchbase based, its new offering on Kubernetes. So we're going back to that again. Seems like the architecture, according to Tony, is pretty solid, but the billing experience may be less than ideal. It's still complicated, right? Kubernetes is still complicated. It's interesting to me that when we see stories like this, because our industry seems to still be focused on the sausage making, and we probably should be more focused on how these services make life less complicated for folks. But one more step forward for data, and that's a good thing.
Sorry, but I did not hug any database engineer yesterday. I had some great interviews this week from Open Source Summit. One was with Dirk Honda, who is chief of open source at VMware. Second was Chris Wright, CTO at Red Hat. And we talked, those were very, very uncomfortable questions regarding race and bias and Black lives. I want to have a separate discussion, but what I want to talk about, or the story that I want to talk about, is we all know there's bias in AI. It's a big problem which cannot be solved easily. As we all know, bias in tech is already there, but it seems to be more or less like a cultural issue. But bias in AI is both cultural and tech. So there is an ongoing debate around bias in AI. One school of thought says we should not AI at all, but then there is another school of thought which says, and I'm also a believer in that school of thought, that we need AI as we evolve as human race. Even Elon Musk says, we have to become cyborg if we want to stay competitive as we move forward in the world of AI and robotics. So it is really important to try to remove bias from AI models. Researchers at Salesforce and University of Virginia are proposing a new way to kind of mitigate at least gender bias from AI by removing potentially gendered words. They find a kind of a cure in what is called word embedding. what it does, it embeds semantic and syntactic meanings of words and relations with other words. For example, like we use the word she with secretary and doctor with he. So what happens over a time, the models start associating with things like brilliant and genius with men, and things like homemaker and swing with women. So there's a lot of bias there associated with those terms and gender. So earlier there were efforts made to kind of subtract the component associated with gender, but a lot of data can be extracted after that, so it was not very effective. So what Salesforce is doing, and VentureBeat reports it, that they call it double hard debias. So what they do is they actually change the association altogether. So let's say if you have a model, if you have an image, and it's more or less about let's say the sentence is, the physician hired the secretary because he was overwhelmed with the client. So now you know that the physician is male, but secretary could be female. So what they have done is they are changing the association that, and they will use to word webbing like the physician hired the secretary because she was overwhelmed with the clients. So there are small, subtle changes, and they feel that they these kind of small changes can work. And they did do some tests, and they found that the performance gap between pro stereotypes and anti-stereotypes reflects how differently an algorithm system performs on the male group and female group, so that it can affect the gender bias score. So a lot of good work is going on there, and you may not have even expected that Salesforce will be doing such kind of work, but these companies are doing a lot of work in AI and ML, and they are fully aware of the problems that are there.
I'd be okay if the bias came through and attached genius to Mike. That'd be good. Lastly, Swapnil, anyone in the tech and media and PR world saw some serious ugliness in the Twitterverse yesterday. A number of prominent VCs viciously attacked New York Times reporter Taylor Lorenz. It seems there are some in the VC community who do not understand journalism and believe that journalists are there to be cheerleaders for the tech industry. And that's wrong. Flat out wrong. Journalists play a vital role in speaking truth to power. A vital role as a watchdog, not only in our industry, but across society. Healthy ecosystems demand friction. They require accountability. An industry that's all unicorns and warm fuzzies is not a healthy industry. And it's why we get disasters like Theranos, and why dangerous corporate cultures are allowed to persist. It's a critical function in society, and it's a critical function in our little piece of the tech industry, and it should be supported. It should be respected, and it should not be abused. Period.
And it should be paid well too.
Absolutely.
Teachers.
Yep, teachers, journalists, more money. Absolutely. So Swap, this was an interesting week in the news. A lot of stuff happening, both from from deep into the code, whether it's databases or up in the clouds and beyond the clouds with space, or even some of the really more important human elements and societal elements of technology. So it's been a good week. We're going into the July 4th holiday here in the U.S. Not sure how much to celebrate this year in the U.S., but it's going to be another week starts next week, and I think it starts next week, right? Or does it start today? So we'll see how it goes, and looking forward to coming back next Friday with more news.